Death Battle is a long-running versus show that takes two fictional characters and pits them against each other to see who would win in a fight to the death. They go over how many abilities a character has, calculate some of their best feats, and even go into their stories and importance in their respective worlds. What's more, they include a fully animated fight between the two after they analyze the two, and they range from sprites to 3D models to 2D animation. They've even dipped their toes into stop motion on occasion where it fits. Personally, my first ever Death Battle was Sora vs. Pit, and ever since then, I've watched every single episode they've made in the over 10 years they've been doing this. Not every episode is a winner, of course. In fact, there are many that are blatantly wrong and even disrespectful to the characters they use, but at its best, Death Battle is a phenomenal show with a ton of passion and heart. And while their future has been thrown into question due to recent events,
thank you so much, you piece of
I have faith that they'll continue on for many more years once they get back on their feet. The best part of Death Battle, in my opinion, is when they select a matchup that you're personally invested in. When you see two characters you really like be on the show and see how they would act when placed against a similar opponent to them. And that's what this video is about. I've got 10 matchups in mind that I want to see someday in the show's future. And even if Death Battle themselves never do them, you can think of this as more of a general matchups that I would want any versus show to tackle. Now, in regards to the matchups themselves, I'll be talking about a few reasons why they work and why I want them. Number 1, connections. What thematic ties do these characters have that would make their interactions cool? And even better, how do they contrast each other in, say, morals or characterization? Number 2, the potential fight. How do I think a fight between the two could work, and who do I think could potentially win if analyzed in a versus sense? Also, how do I think the fight should be animated? Every matchup requires a different feel given the characters. Number 3, personal investment. Obviously, every countdown I've ranked has been my own personal opinion, but in this case, that's much more of a factor since every viewer of Death Battle will want something different from a potential matchup on the show. So expect a lot more bias here than normal. That should be everything, so let's begin. Perry the Platypus from Phineas and Ferb versus Skipper from Madagascar. Two semi-aquatic, egg-laying creatures of action. Half their day is spent pretending to be ordinary animals that don't do much, but the other half is spent kicking butt and taking names. What's especially interesting is their somewhat opposite moral standings. Perry is a hero, plain and simple. He's always fighting against evil to protect those he loves, and will even help out his villains from time to time. Skipper, however, is more of a rogue. He does care about his team and will go to hell and back to protect them, but he's also not above doing some shady things. I mean, he and his team broke into Fort Knox just to celebrate Private's birthday. That, and he's a lot more callous about most things. There's also the fact that out of every character from both Phineas and Ferb and Madagascar, these two are really the only candidates I want on the show. Alex does have a matchup against Otis from Barnyard, but that's not particularly exciting in my book. Some people would like to see Doofenshmirtz on the show, but while that would be funny, I don't see a ton of good matchups for him. Also, I'd rather not have Phineas and Ferb themselves on the show, because seeing them kill or be killed themselves doesn't sound right. Now, as for how a fight between these two would go, I'd imagine that Perry would be on a typical mission to stop Doofenshmirtz, but Skipper and the gang would break in on their own terms. Skipper, naturally being one to pick a fight, would go for Doofenshmirtz, but Perry would get in the way, separating him from the rest of the team, where the fight begins proper. What would the rest of the squad do? I don't know, I guess they'd deal with Doofenshmirtz. Anyways, the ensuing fight would probably work best in a hand-drawn animation. Obviously because Perry originates from a 2D animated show, but also because other styles don't really suit both characters. 2D sprites don't exactly fit the feel of either Skipper or Perry, and while 3D models would obviously fit Skipper, I haven't seen too many good 3D models of Perry. As for the winner, I think it'll most likely be Perry, and a major reason why is that Skipper is primarily the team leader. He's more than capable on his own. I mean, he bitch slapped a leopard seal as a chick, but a lot of his best feats come from working together with his team. Perry is primarily a lone wolf and is able to hold his own a lot better than Skipper. Add in Perry's wide variety of gadgets and gimmicks, as well as the fact that he regularly fights a guy that eats explosions every day, I don't see a scenario where he loses. Granted, Skipper would be more willing to kill Perry, but there's no way Alka's best agent wouldn't kill if absolutely necessary. So yeah, I give the win to H&P, but Skipper would put up a good fight regardless. This matchup isn't something I would be head over heels for, which is why it's at number 10, but if it did happen, I'd be pretty excited. Fall Guy from Fall Guys versus Imposter from Among Us, two being-like characters from multiplayer games that exploded in popularity and are still going strong today. I know this one sounds kinda goofy, but that's what makes me like it so much. Both of these games are silly and fun in their own ways, and seeing them bounce off each other with creative slapstick would be really fun. Or better yet, since the average Among Us imposter is supposed to be a dark and violent killer, you could have that contrast with the Fall Guys' natural cartoonish demeanor. The setup for the fight would be really good too. You can have a Fall Guys match going on while the skeld is flying overhead, and one imposter gets ejected, landing onto the course, stopping one of the Fall Guys where the imposter then attempts to kill him. I specifically chose a Fall Guy course because that would offer the most fun environments. The skeld or one of the other Among Us maps could make for some decent set pieces, but the Fall Guys courses usurp literally all of them. In terms of what animation style would be used, I actually once saw an animation that had a mix between sprites and hand-drawn animation, and it fit really well. You would think 3D models would work just fine because of Among Us VR and Fall Guys being 3D games, but surprisingly the sprite and hand-drawn aesthetic just works for me. As for the winner, that requires an important question. Can a Fall Guy kill someone? Ordinarily, you don't see a Fall Guy fight in the game. The closest they get is throwing stuff and pushing and pulling other Fall Guys, but that doesn't necessarily mean they aren't capable of slapping around an imposter. Plus, if one was able to throw an imposter hard enough, I'd say they could kill it. Good thing too, because an imposter doesn't have any way to kill a Fall Guy. I mean, they have guns, a knife, and their sharp tongue, and are strong enough to snap crewmates' necks, but Fall Guys get smacked, blasted, and launched several feet through the air on a daily basis, and don't get so much as bruised. To add insult to injury, the average height of a Fall Guy is around 6 feet, which is almost twice as big as an imposter's 3'6". So there's nothing stopping them from being thrown around like those blast balls in the game. It's ironic considering one's role in their game is to kill everyone, but sadly, unless the Among Us TV show gives them a major buff, the Fall Guy is coming out on top. Admittedly, this matchup wouldn't have a very interesting analysis since there's practically nothing to go over from a character standpoint, but since I really like both Fall Guys and Among Us, I can't help but have a soft spot for it. Chai and 808 from Hi-Fi Rush versus Mayday and Zook from No Straight Roads, two instrument-wielding duos who just want to play rock music but can't do their oppressive corporate overlords. So they form a resistance to take down their respective corporations with the power of rock and roll. Now those of you who played Hi-Fi Rush are probably wondering why I chose Lumpin' 808, Peppermint's robot cat, in with Chai to make it more fair against the duo Mayday and Zook. Well, 808 is not only responsible for summoning Peppermint, Macaron, and Corsica to help with assists, but 808 is perfectly capable of throwing hands on their own. I know some people might prefer to just have Chai on his own against Cadence from the Crypt of the Necrodancer, or the Unknown from Metal Hellsinger, but those matchups don't feel as thematic given they're just protagonists of rhythm games going against each other. This one has that, and a little more to it that makes it work. Plus, I've never played Crypt of the Necrodancer or Metal Hellsinger, even though I would like to one day. Now for the fight, I'd imagine it'd start with Mayday and Zook performing in Vinyl City, only for Chai to swoop in like the wannabe rock star he is, and accidentally disrupt the concert. Mayday, being highly aggressive, would choose to pick a fight rather than sort things out like Zook would, forcing Chai to fight back. Now there are a couple things that they have to get right if they were to do this matchup. One, the animation has to be hand-drawn. I know both No Straight Roads and Hi-Fi Rush are 3D games, but both of them also have incredible hand-drawn cutscenes that look sublime. If they could capture that same vibrance in a death battle, it'd be amazing. 2, during the fights, Chai needs to be synced with the beat of the music. Mayday and Zook not so much as they move at their own pace, but Chai's whole stick is that he moves with the beat. I mean, he has an MP3 player for a harp for Pete's sake. It just wouldn't feel right if he didn't fight to the beat of the song. As for who wins, my money's on Chai coming away the victor. He has a lot more abilities than both Mayday and Zook, and the amount of punishment he can take is more than enough to contend with the rock stars. I'd say their one advantage is that they don't need to follow the beat of the song while Chai does, but at the same time, the combat in No Straight Roads isn't synced with the song, so they do need to follow the beat at least a little bit. Really, their best bet at killing Chai would be their finisher, the Bunka Junka Shakalaka Bam, which was able to take out a falling satellite that would have destroyed NSR Tower upon impact, but that was with the help of several others. On their own, the attack can only cause a decent-sized impact, and Chai was in the epicenter of this robot blowing up, which easily usurps that. Glad that's the case, honestly, because I really like Chai and would hate to see him get killed. course, that's not to say I don't like Mayday and Zook, but I have my preferences. Either way, this will be one heck of a performance should they decide to do it.
You got a killer track. But every song's gotta end.
Bowser from Super Mario vs. Dr. Eggman from Sonic the Hedgehog. Do I even need to explain the connections? It's two of the biggest villains in video game media duking it out. The long-standing rivalry of the 90s being brought to the forefront yet again. And to me personally, this is the only Mario vs. Sonic matchup left that should be done. The rest of them are just a third bout that only serves to fuel the endless debates, a rematch that only exists because Luigi fans want Tails to die, man you guys are sadistic, and a bunch of boring, impossible, and detestable matchups that don't need to exist. So Bowser vs. Eggman will work especially well as both a season finale and the last Mario vs. Sonic matchup they need to do. Obviously, they could still use Mario and Sonic characters on the show against different franchises. In fact, there are a few out there that I would have interest in seeing, but in terms of specifically Mario vs. Sonic, this is the only one left that they need to do. As for the fight, I think it should be a 3D fight. Sprites would be serviceable enough, but wouldn't capture the same scale deserving of these two, and while hand-drawn could work if done well, it still wouldn't feel exactly right, unlike Mario vs. Sonic 2018. The setup, meanwhile, could be any number of things. You could have Bowser attempting to take over Eggman's fortress for his own, Eggman trying to conquer Bowser's kingdom in his pursuit of Eggman Land, or have them both cross paths during their conquest and duke it out. I mention these options specifically because this fight should absolutely be an army battle. Aside from one part of Steven Universe vs. Star Butterfly, Death Battle hasn't done a proper army fight since Eggman vs. Wily back in 2012. And having two big villains that each command large armies in most of their games would be a prime opportunity to do it again. You could have the low-level troops do most of the fighting before Bowser brings out Junior and the Koopalings, and Eggman brings out Metal Sonic and maybe even Sage. And of course it would end with Fury Bowser versus the Death Egg Robot. There's no way they wouldn't end with that. They know people want it, so why not give it to them? Now the winner is actually a bit trickier to figure out. I've seen several people say that Bowser wins, but I think Eggman has a better shot than most people give him. Putting aside the ending of Galaxy 1, as it's highly debatable whether or not they actually survived the rebirth of a galaxy, or died and were reborn along with the galaxy, Bowser's best feat is surviving the black hole in Galaxy 2, which puts him around large star level. Meanwhile, Eggman has built machinery that can take out stars, such as in Sonic Battle, where he attached a laser to the Death Egg that could take out multiple stars at once. And the Death Egg Robot, the Forces version, not the OG, is stated by Eggman to have surpassed Infinite's power, who created a star to drop onto the Resistance. Some of you may bring up Fury Bowser as a way to overpower that, but we don't actually have a way to scale Fury Bowser. He has some of his own abilities, but the most he does feats-wise is just alter the weather in the general area. It makes him look scarier for sure, but it's not all that impressive in a scaling sense. Plus, if you factor in the armies, Eggman easily has the upper hand. A lot of Eggman's robots could wipe out a majority of Bowser's troops, and while Junior and the Koopalings would do the most damage, we've seen how those guys fight. Eggman really only needs Metal Sonic to take him down. Obviously, Bowser would not go down without a fight, and there are probably scenarios where he would win, but Eggman has a lot more going for him than you'd think. However, regardless of who wins, the most important thing they need to get right is their characters. Both of these guys have reputations for being pretty comedic and cartoonish in their demeanors, but when they get serious and fight with everything they got, you understand why these two are still the big bads of their respective universes. I don't want these two to just be Saturday morning cartoon villains. I want to see them let loose and be threatening as I know they both can be. If they get that right, I'll be a happy camper no matter who takes it. You have one job, Death Battle. Don't screw it up.
No matter. I may have suffered a setback, but this thing's far from over. I will crush Sonic!
Gru from Despicable Me versus Megamind from, well, Megamind. Two former villains who are genius inventors and an army of one-eyed minions, but were turned into heroes after a life-changing experience. With Megamind, it was through happiness with Roxanne, and with Gru, it was through happiness with his Goyles. This is is a fairly popular matchup that's been wanted for a while now, and honestly, I'm right there with them. I remember watching Megamind quite a bit as a kid, and I still go back to Despicable Me movies on occasion. Granted, most of them aren't the best, minions, but I still have a good laugh watching them. So having these two clash would be fun to see, especially if they could capture the same hilarious charm Will Ferrell and Steve Carell put into their respective characters. And even though the likelihood of this episode happening has dramatically lowered given the release of Megamind vs. the Doom Syndicate and Megamind Rules along with the upcoming release of Despicable Me 4, I think they'll be fine ignoring them since everyone hates what they did with Megamind, and Despicable Me 4 doesn't look like it's gonna add much to Gru in a versus sense. Moving on to the fight, having it be 3D is a no-brainer. I mean, not having it such would be criminal, and not in a good sense despite the irony. However, the setup is a bit tricky to pin down. See, given that these two are both heroes by the end of their respective movies, I doubt you could get these two to fight based on their former lives. Gru does still have an edge to him even after becoming a full-time hero, so I guess you could work with that. Maybe have Megamind accidentally interfere with Gru's mission to stop a villain, and Gru being irritated by it picks a fight with Megamind? I don't know, that's the best I can come up with going against these two characters. If you guys can think of anything else, please let me know. I'm open to suggestions. I will say, while it wouldn't be on the same scale as Bowser vs. Eggman, having at least a moment where Megamind summons his hundreds of Brainbots and maybe Minion 2 to combat Gru's hundreds of minions and maybe Dr. Nefario as well would be cool to see in action. As for the winner, I think this is a mostly even match. Both of them are genius adventures with a plethora of weapons at their disposal, as well as their own personal favorites, Gru's Freeze Ray and Megamind's Dehydration Gun. Megamind does have a giant mech he could use, but Gru could counter that with the Shrink Ray or the firepower on his ship. I've already brought up the Brainbots versus the Minions, and neither has a significant edge in that regard. The Brainbots are far more intelligent and capable, yet can be taken out with a stick of dynamite, and the Minions are basically indestructible, yet incredibly stupid and incompetent. If we're talking a physical sense, however, that point goes to Megamind. Gru is definitely more skilled in hand-to-hand and can take a lot of punishment, but Megamind dealt with Markiplier if he were Superman all his life, and bested Titan who had the same powers. While he obviously can't keep pace with Metro Man's true speed, the fact that he can keep pace with Titan who can break the sound barrier and even take a hit from him when he threw the top half of a giant tower moments earlier makes him faster and tougher than Gru by a large margin. It's a shame because I'm probably one of 5 people who unironically likes Gru more than Megamind, but when faced with the facts, I gotta give it to the other side. Though, as a small ending note, apparently some people believe this matchup is a same studio matchup, and I don't understand why. Guys, it's common knowledge that Despicable Me is an Illumination property and Megamind is a DreamWorks property. They may be owned by Universal, but they're not the same studio. If you seriously believe one of these companies made both, you're either giving Illumination way too much credit or making DreamWorks look worse than they already are, especially with their recent track record this year. Anyways, Megamind probably wins, and as long as they don't acknowledge Megamind 2 or Rules, I'll be happy.
Oh, you're a villain, all right. Just not a super one.
Yeah? What's the difference?
Presentation!
Boys and girls of every age, would you like to see something strange? Come with us and you will see. It's Halloween.
Jack Skellington from The Nightmare Before Christmas versus the Grinch from How the Grinch Stole Christmas. Two spooky characters that stole Christmas for their own gains. In Jack's case, it was something new and exciting, and in Grinch's case, it was to spite the Who's of Whoville. Oh, and as a bonus, they both have loyal dog companions. Jack has Zero and Grinch has Max. Anyone who's watched my recent Kingdom Hearts videos knows that I absolutely love The Nightmare Before Christmas. And I also love How the Grinch Stole Christmas. I read the original book as a kid and watched every adaptation, except the Jim Carrey version, and liked all of them. So seeing these two characters on the show would make my day, especially with how they contrast one another. Jack is a character that is meant to be scary, but is actually a really nice guy, only scaring because it's his job. The Grinch, however, is a character that's as mean as he is scary, at least before his change of heart at the end of the book, so that could make for some interesting interactions. Now, those of you who've watched The Nightmare Before Christmas and or the 60s Grinch short might be thinking that these two aren't really compatible to be used in Death Battle, but if you look closely, there's actually plenty of material to work with in both their original works and extended media. For example, Jack was fast enough to dodge gunfire from Oogie Boogie's traps and tough enough to survive being shot out of the sky and falling thousands of feet back down, only really sustaining minor injuries. Also, there's a video game sequel to the original film called The Nightmare Before Christmas Oogie's Revenge, and in it, Jack was made quite a fighter with plenty of abilities to use in combat. I'd also mention Kingdom Hearts, but that series kind of exists in its own bubble compared to the original Disney films. Not to mention, all Jack does is spam magic in those games, so that's not very useful. As for the Grinch, he was not only fast enough to rob an entire town's Christmas decorations and presents in a single night, but also strong enough to lift said decorations and presents and the sleigh holding them over his head. Plus, there's the Jim Carrey and Illumination Grinch movies, which, love them or hate them, gave the Grinch plenty of Christmas-themed gadgets to use. Some may think that'd be compositing the Grinch, but I wouldn't say it is, since they're just the same story told in different ways.
Monster!
No, not that one. We do not talk about that one. Now, as for the fight, the setup writes itself. Jack is on his way to bring his own version of Christmas to the world and ends up in Whoville on the night the Grinch is stealing Christmas. The two end up crossing paths, and Jack is initially surprised to see Santa Claus here, but realizes the Grinch is not Santa Claus upon closer inspection. The Grinch, not wanting any interference in his heist, attempts to take Jack out, and fisticuffs ensue. The animation could probably work in a 3D or hand-drawn style if you could draw Jack in a good style or make a good Grinch model. Best case scenario, we get a stop-motion fight reminiscent of The Nightmare Before Christmas, but that's a bit too unrealistic. The winner, meanwhile, is easily Jack, primarily because even with the newer gadgets, the Grinch doesn't have any way to kill Jack. According to Tim Burton, the people of Halloween Town can be permanently killed if their bodies are destroyed, but Jack surviving being blasted out of the sky makes him far too tough for the Grinch to kill. Grinch is definitely a lot faster by a wide margin and can likely pack a punch, but thanks to Oogie's revenge, Jack is a superior fighter all around. The best part about an episode like this, though, is the fact that it could work as both a Halloween episode and a Christmas episode, just like The Night Before Christmas. And I look forward to whichever date they choose to someday release it. Or they could do it in November as a middle ground, that works too.
Uh-oh. I hope there's still time to set things right. Santa Claus.
Travis touchdown for No More Heroes versus Jack Kamen from Mad World. Two ultra-violent killers that entered a game of killing to rise through the ranks and become the best there ever was and ever will be. And they're also from games that were originally released on the Wii of all things. They also have somewhat opposing personalities, with Jack being more subdued and matter-of-fact with his killings, while Travis is extremely crass and vulgar when he kills. Plus, Travis eventually, over the course of his games, learns to be a better man and escape his endless cycle of killing, while Jack is far more complacent in his role of a top killer. I've seen a few people not really like this matchup since they'd rather have Travis fight Scott Pilgrim, but Scott only has baseline similarities like video game aesthetics and a similar weapon to Travis. Jack has a bit more that just works better as a fighter to Travis, and I feel like they're able to work with their ultra-violent roots better than with Scott. The fight, meanwhile, obviously has to be 3D, but there's something else that I feel has to happen. Those of you who play Mad World would know that it sports a black and white comic book aesthetic, with the only other color being the red blood of your enemies. So if they want to fully capitalize on an episode with Jack, there needs to be at least a moment where they attempt to mimic the comic book aesthetic of Mad World. You can use Jack's model from Anarchy Reigns, the spiritual successor to Mad World, to somewhat match Travis's normal model, but I really want to see them attempt to capture the same vibe as Mad World for at least part of the fight. They made custom models to match the art styles of characters in the past, so I don't see how they couldn't make a black and white version of Travis too. Of course, the setup will write itself too. Since they're both champions of their respective games, both of them would enter a game much like the games they both partake in their respective worlds, and the fight would be the last one where they face off. As for who wins, that's Travis, easily. Both of them are equally skilled in killing a variety of opponents, with Travis having 4 games under his belt, and Jack having beaten 4 in-universe games, plus Anarchy Reigns if you want to count that. And both of them are powerful enough to take on guys that can summon black holes, but Travis has the edge everywhere else. He survives several deadly explosions, is fast enough to dodge lasers, and has several unique lightsabers, beam katanas, to use against Jack. Jack's chainsaw arm is plenty strong enough to contend with said beam katanas, but then in No More Heroes 3, Travis got a mech suit that made every part of him even more powerful. To be fair, I never finished Anarchy Reigns, so maybe there's something there that Jack can use to his advantage, but as it stands, Travis would most likely take it. I just hope they finally do it sometime soon, because this matchup is almost as old as Cole versus Alex, and that one was asked for since Season 2, I think. Like, what are you waiting for? Come on!
What? There are no heroes in this world? Oh, but there totally are. My name is Travis Touchdown. I'm the last hero around, here to save the world. I'm also just a passing assassin. Here we go. taking a kill trip on death row.
Ori from the Ori duology versus the Knight from Hollow Knight, two protagonists of Metroidvanias with beautiful hand-drawn art styles that fight for opposing elements. Ori fights against creatures of darkness, and the Knight fights against the Goddess of Light. This is another really big matchup that's been requested for a long time, and I'm fully behind it. Even though I never finished Hollow Knight and only beat Ori in the Blind Forest, I've always been intrigued by this matchup purely because of how fun it would be. Both are silent protagonists, so it's not like we get much depth from them character-wise, but their capabilities in battle will make a clash between them so invigorating. Ori's acrobatics and the Knight's skill with their blade could lead to quite possibly the best sword fight we've ever had on the show. And I mean that unironically, considering we already have Samurai Jack vs Afro Samurai. Given that both characters hail from games with hand-drawn art styles, it's obvious that the fight should be hand-drawn too. You can't cop out with pixel sprites on this one like they did with Star vs Steven. This fight deserves to be hand-drawn all the way. It should also have a big chase sequence like in the Ori games, having the two climb up a wall in their own ways to escape some natural catastrophe while still fighting each other in the air. Maybe even include some solely air combat as well. Now, the winner, from what I can gather, given that I have yet to finish their games, would probably be the Knight. Ori has enough skills and powers to handle the Knight's swordplay and abilities, and is plenty fast on their feet with all the chase sequences they do, but the Knight is fast enough to dodge beams of light, and was able to kill a literal goddess. Tough as Ori is, they ain't beating that. Not to mention, the Knight has fought a ton of different warriors, which gives them all the experience they need to deal with Ori, who's only ever fought wild creatures. Much like Travis vs Jack, I'm surprised this one hasn't been touched on yet given how much of a following both the Hollow Knight and the Ori games have. But just like Silksong, we'll have to wait forever before they do it. No, but seriously, please don't wait that long. I want to be alive when it happens. Bendy from Bendy and the Ink Machine versus Cuphead from Cuphead. Two cartoon characters from indie games that put a spin on traditional rubber hose cartoons. Cuphead being an incredibly hard cartoon shooter, and Bendy being a Disney studio turned nightmarish hellscape. Interestingly enough, Death Battle has technically done this one in the past through DBX, where they skip any and all research and just have them fight each other. However, as fun as that was, I think a proper Death Battle with these two could still provide an equally or even more fun time. Especially with the release of the Delicious Last Course, the Cuphead Show, and Dark Revival, and maybe even The Cage? We'll have to wait a little bit for that one, but I'm sure that'll provide some interesting stuff to be used in an episode. The best thing about this potential matchup is the sharp contrast between them. Cuphead is a full-blown cartoon through and through, while Bendy has pieces of cartoon but is by and large a horror series. So having them start out like a traditional cartoon only to make a hard turn later into Bendy's horror roots would be really cool if done well. As for the fight, we already have a decent setup thanks to the DBX. Toon Bendy comes across Cuphead wanting to make a new friend, but Cuphead mistakes him for the devil from his world and fights him. The animation style, though, has some people in contention. Due to the existence of the DBX with its brilliant hand-drawn visuals, some believe that a Death Battle couldn't capture the same magic, even though masterpieces like Scooby vs. Courage and Samurai Jack vs. Afro Samurai exist. Well, I have a workaround that could help the Death Battle stand out on its own. What if, for the first half, they go with the cartoon style of Cuphead and the Bendy shorts and comics, but in the second half, they enter the Ink world and shift to the 3D style of Bendy? That sounds like it could work really well, especially when elevating the horror Bendy's known for. Granted, 3D Cuphead wouldn't look the best, but I think you could still work in the Bendy art style. As for who wins, a ton of people I've seen believe that Cuphead wins, but I don't believe that for a minute. It's true that Cuphead has a variety of finger gun techniques to use, but Bendy has plenty of abilities from the comics to counteract that. Cuphead did move the moon a bit in the Cuphead show, but Bendy scales to Boris, who ate the moon, albeit over a longer time period. Sure, that places Toon Bendy slightly less powerful than Cuphead, but as the Ink Demon and Beast Bendy, his power grows exponentially and would easily overpower Cuphead. But what about the Devil, I hear you say? What about the Devil? We don't know how powerful he is, and there's not really any way we can calculate such. Yeah, he's the ruler of Hell, but that doesn't necessarily mean he made it. And even if he did, it's not that impressive. Hell is a place you can walk to in the Cuphead universe. It's not like it's a separate dimension. Cuphead dodging lightning does make him faster compared to Bendy scaling to Audrey, who dodged machine gun fire, but speed means nothing when you can't hurt your opponent, which Cuphead can't. Some people suggested that Cuphead could wear down the Ink Demon to eventually kill him, but the Keepers tried that in Dark Revival and got nowhere. They even resorted to torturing him every 15 minutes and he didn't feel anything. So what makes you think Cuphead would get anywhere doing the same thing? In any case, this episode might not happen anytime soon given their current state and the existence of the DBX, but should the day come when it finally happens, my hype levels will be through the roof. My number one pick is probably going to be the most out there choice, and to be honest, has a very low chance of happening. But I can't help but be enthralled by the sheer potential of this matchup. I want this to happen so badly that I can't not talk about it as my number one. So without further ado, my number one most wanted death battle matchup is... Kara from Undertale versus Sonic.exe from Creepypasta. Two nightmarish characters commonly referred to as demons, whether by themselves or by the fanbase, that both have powers connected to souls and can see beyond the fourth wall. Both have blood red eyes with blood dripping from them, though Kara is more so in fan art, and both have a fixation on the person playing their games, with Kara wanting to punish the player for their actions in the genocide route, and EXE wanting to trap the player in his world so he can torment them forever. Now, I know EXE has other opponents that people prefer, such as Fleetway Supersonic or Red from Godzilla NES or even Slenderman, but I feel like this one is the best because there's more to it beyond just Crazy Sonic versus Evil Sonic or Creepypasta versus Creepypasta. Not only do they share the connections I mentioned prior, but their characters are so intrinsically opposite to each other that it clicks together so nicely. For many years, the Undertale community assumed Kara was this evil killing machine who slaughtered people just because, when in reality, they were the opposite of that. They were the punishment for the player acting the same way they thought Kara had acted, and the same way EXE acts on his day-to-day. Everyone who knows EXE knows that he slaughters people purely out of sadistic pleasure. He has no reason to kill, but does so anyway because it's fun. In essence, he's the embodiment of everything Kara hates in the player. So they'd be trying to punish a being far beyond any player they've dealt with before, while EXE just laughs, believing they're in over their head and that he's the one who's above consequences. And if that's not enough for you somehow, there was an Undertale fan game called Different Topic where Kara was replaced by EXE. Are you not convinced yet? Now, given that these characters in their original media aren't seen doing all that much, you're probably wondering how we can make these characters applicable for Death Battle's format. Well, I have a solution. Both characters have become immensely popular through subsequent fan games that either make their own versions of the characters, or take the existing characters and expand upon them. So, if we were to take the latter and use everything in those fan games to give both characters wider arsenals, on top of scaling to the in-universe characters they can scale to, EXE to Sonic as he replicated Sonic in every way except morals, and Kara to Genocide Frisk as that's what they're the end result of, they'd have more than enough to use for an episode. And before you say that's a composite, if they stick to stuff that's close enough to the original works that it doesn't step too far into any AUs, it should be perfectly fine. In EXE's case, use stuff like One Last Round, Xenophanes, and even Lord X as he's supposed to be an older version of the OG EXE, while avoiding stuff like Needle Mouse and EYX. And in Kara's case, use stuff like No More Deals and maybe Glitch Tail if you work it right, while avoiding stuff like Story Shift and Cross Tail. Now the fight would be really easy to set up. While Frisk is on our genocide route, some random monster is playing EXE's game, causing him to be summoned and kill everyone in Snowden. Frisk appears on the town seeing the carnage, and EXE attempts to make them another victim. Kara takes over Frisk, and the fight begins. The animation style I think would work really well as 2D sprites, and even more. This is wishful thinking, I know, but what if the fight starts out as the 8-bit style of Undertale, but when EXE takes the fights to his realm, it shifts to a more advanced custom sprite aesthetic reminiscent of all the EXE games. Then later on, when it becomes Xenophanes, the style then shifts to a hand-drawn aesthetic to match Friday Night Funkin', where Xenophanes originated and where Kara still has popularity, being part of the first real FNF mods. I can't be the only one that finds that cool, right? As for the winner, it's no contest. EXE's got this hands down. He's way faster, more powerful, and has too many abilities for Kara to handle. And it's not like Kara could abuse their save points like Frisk can. EXE can see beyond the fourth wall, so it'd only be a matter of time before he figures out what they're doing, takes the fight to his realm, and destroys their save. Kara only has two options for taking EXE down for good. Their erased attack, which seemingly obliterates everything in existence, or somehow surviving long enough in their own world so that EXE dies since he can't stay outside of his realm for long. The former isn't completely reliable since it appears to be limited to the Undertale universe or whatever current universe they're in, so all EXE needs to do is travel to another universe for a second, which he's more than fast enough to do, and the latter is never gonna happen since they never survived that long. And even if they could, EXE can go back to his realm whenever he wants. So really, there's no way Kara wins, despite my past experience arguing with an incredibly adamant Kara stan. Regardless of all that though, one thing I really want from this matchup is for them to really nail how scary these two can be. In their heyday, both of these characters terrified the whole internet, and even nowadays, fans have found ways to rekindle that same horror. So at some point, they should absolutely capitalize on that aspect of both of them if they really want to give them the respect they deserve. If they can do it for Venom, Carnage, Jason, and Michael, they can do it for these two. And that's my list of most wanted death battle matchups. I certainly hope you enjoyed all that, and if you did, consider liking, subscribing, and commenting about what you think of my matchups. And even talk about some of your own most wanted matchups. I'd love to hear who you guys want to see on the show. As for next time, I'll be back on the Kingdom Hearts grind with Kingdom Hearts 2. From what I can gather, this is the fan favorite of the franchise, so maybe this will be the one that makes me like the franchise, since the last two have been just okay and infuriatingly rough. Not holding out hope for the lore improving, but I do hope the game's as fun as everyone says. See you next time, everybody!